All right, hey, what's going on, guys? It is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and today I'm joined with Noah of BDGE, and I'm going to be interviewing him today. This is obviously the first ever on the channel, so Noah, congratulations to you for being the first guy to get
Thank you. It's a
interviewed.
big honor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a huge honor over here, but obviously I've never interviewed anyone, so this may be a bit slow at the beginning, but obviously it should be able to pick up. So let's get right into it. So, Noah, how did you start to get into fantasy football?
It all started my freshman year of high school, which I'm 20 right now. I don't know how old people typically are as a freshman. I wasn't held back or anything. So the average age minus 20 is
14.
14. So about 6 years ago. It was just with one of my friends, parts of his family, and other people that were like in my classes and stuff. We started out. It was an 8-team league. I didn't really know much about football other than like the big names and guys on the Chargers. So I just
Yeah.
picked like Danny Woodheads and like AJ Greens and Julio Joneses. And I still remember my friends and I went to like New York for a day, and we were in the backseat of the car, and one of my friends offered me a trade. He was giving me like Julio Jones and Jamal Charles for like Antonio Gates and Darren Sproles. And I didn't know anybody, but like Darren Sproles and Antonio Gates were like old as hell. So I obviously knew their names. I'm like, I don't know, but I'll do it. And then those guys were obviously Jamal Charles and Julio were fantastic. So I didn't know much about football back then, like in depth wise, like talking today's terms, like I wouldn't have known like a Michael Gallup or anything. So I wasn't great at that. It was an 8-team league, so it was like obviously easy to have a team.
Yeah.
Then the next year, I joined my home league, which is 16 teams. There was actually money on the line. And I realized that if I didn't want to lose money year after year, I had to actually do a little bit of research. And that's when I started getting into the numbers more and brought me closer to, I guess, where I am today.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That's how I kind of started as well. I started when I was a lot younger, but because my dad got me into it when I was like 8 years old. And so I've been playing for like 12 years. So,
Yeah, it's always good to start early. My like younger cousins will show me their teams and they're in like 6-man leagues. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's pretty good when you're playing against like you have everybody on your team and you're playing against everybody else who has the top tier talent. So there's not much competition when you first start out for most people, but like, I think the bigger the league, the more fun. And I think that's typically how most people go is they progress throughout bigger leagues.
yeah, that's definitely true. Do you follow any other sports, or are you mainly a football guy? Do you watch like baseball, anything like that?
I used to be baseball used to be like my sport. I used to play it all the time. I used to, watch it all the time. Big Red Sox fan. I kind of
Ah,
felt I used to. What are you?
I'm a Mets fan.
Well, not
Yeah,
much to brag
we
about
just
there.
suck. There's no bragging.
Yeah. But I used to be like super into baseball, right? But then, the game's kind of slow. I tried fantasy baseball one time. It wasn't my thing. I drafted Ryan Braun first overall. He got busted for PEDs, so I lost half the season there. I kind of just gave up after that.
Oh,
Basketball for sure. Big Celtics fan. I used to like OKC, and then we all know that they kind of fell apart, even though they're decent this year. So, but mostly football is like what I'll watch the most. I'm the most engaged in. Obviously during the season because of fantasy football and playoff football, as we all know, is just so fun to watch. We get to see teams like the Titans take down the Patriots and stuff like that. But also playoff basketball and like March Madness I'll watch because those games are actually intense compared to like the regular season. So I'm really into those.
mhm.
As for like playing sports, I played like flag football a couple years in a row and I was like just bigger than everybody else. So I was fucking like Calvin Johnson out there. But
God damn.
baseball and basketball, but football, like never really played it competitively.
Oh, so then why do you like the Chargers then? If you like every other Boston team, seems like.
Uh, well, because I guess the Patriots are the only team in this area, but my whole team were Patriots fans. And at a young age, I realized I didn't want to be a Patriots fan. I didn't like how many of them acted, I guess you could say. So when I first started, like not really getting into fantasy football, but like my dad obviously played it. And one year he took LaDainian Tomlinson with the first overall pick. And I was like
Yeah.
4 or 5 years old. And they're obviously never on TV, but when they were, like I would watch the guy play. He had the visor. He was my favorite player. That's why he's like my brand on Twitter, I guess, is my like avatar.
Mhm.
So I started to get into them there. And then they had a couple other cool guys. They had like Quentin Jammer, Antonio Cromartie and his 15 kids, along with Phillip Rivers and his 20 kids,
Yeah.
Vincent Jackson, Antonio Gates. Like everybody that went through there just seemed to like his players. And I think LaDainian Tomlinson was like the first player that solidified my interest in the team.
Oh, that makes sense. I live in New Jersey and I'm a fan of the Dolphins, so it's a similar thing here. A lot of
I saw
Jets.
when you started the call, there was a picture. I think it was Drake and the Miami Miracle.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I didn't know. Mets fan and a Dolphins fan. It's got to be kind of tough, but
Yeah, it is. Two terrible teams. I also like the Devils in hockey. They suck too. So
I know nothing
disappointing.
about hockey, but I'm assuming if the trend continues that they're not very good.
Yeah, no, every sport here, just we're just fucking terrible at everything. Do you like being like someone who people like rely on for information, or do you find that to be like kind of like a tough type of thing to deal with? Like if you get something wrong, do you like feel bad or no?
If I get something wrong, I don't feel bad because I'm not a person who's going to shy away from saying I was wrong. Like Derrick Henry this year, I never really admitted I was wrong, but I think everybody knows I was wrong about Derrick Henry. And it's like an
Yeah.
ongoing joke just to say sell him. But I think for me personally, like all the advice I give, even if it's like a simple start sit, I have rationale behind why I say it. So if I am wrong, sure, I feel bad that I gave somebody the wrong player to start, but I know like deep down or whatever that what I said to them was rooted in good interest and I actually had like an objective take on it. It's not just me saying, like if somebody asked me, should I start Frank Gore or Derrick Henry? Although I may want to say Frank Gore, I know to say Derrick Henry, not only because of matchup, but he's like a better player. So when it comes down to it, even in like the preseason, just trying to make like projections and predict what's going to happen this season, nobody's going to be perfect. Nobody's really an expert at any of this stuff. So I don't necessarily feel bad, but I'd obviously want to get everything right if I could.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. A lot of people in the comments will try to get at you that you made some wrong call 5 months ago, but there's nothing you can really do about that.
Yeah, there was actually one that I projected or predicted, however you want to put it, Matt Breida to be like the biggest steal in drafts, and like Nick and I were high on this take, and then somebody in the comments said something like, "I don't believe in Breida; he's always hurt, but D.D. Westbrook will be a top 15 guy," and then that was probably in July, and then a couple weeks ago, I get a notification. It's like somebody responded to a comment on YouTube, and he's like, "So how was that Breida take?" And I said, "Well, it's just about as good as your D.D. Westbrook one." So.
Oh, yeah, no, I definitely get that. People in my comment section do the same shit. Like a few days ago, I predicted that the Seahawks would play against the Ravens in the Super Bowl, and someone's like, "No, man, it's going to be the I don't even know who it was. It was the
Patriots and
Patriots
Saints
versus
probably.
someone else who got eliminated." And I was like, "Well, you were just double wrong, so go fuck yourself." And the guy's like getting after me in the comments. So,
Those are always the best. I like those negative comments. They get me fired up.
okay. Do you like when do you see a lot of positive comments or negative, or do you feel it's like a mix?
I think it's like overwhelmingly positive or like sit start questions in the comments. I don't think people like not many people go out there and like try to bash me personally or me or Nick or whenever we put out a video. Nobody's really making too many personal attacks. A lot of people say stuff about my looks, which I guess like it's jokingly, it's funny. I get it, but yeah, nothing's really like overly negative. Uh, and if it is overly negative, I realize that it's probably doesn't have to do with me, right? Like all I'm doing is giving opinions backed with like numbers and stuff. So if people are really like trying to get at me and are seriously negative towards me, I think it's more of an indictment on them than it is on me.
Oh yeah, that definitely makes sense. They're just getting mad at you for no reason.
Yeah, it's all fun and games. It's just fantasy football at the end of the day. Like we're just trying to have a good time.
Yeah, exactly. Until you get the comments of people being like, "I lost $1,000 because of you." I was like, "I told you to, I may have told you to bet the mortgage, but I wasn't being serious." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
But
I put that phrase out there way too often that I'm afraid that if somebody does lose their house, I may be liable.
yeah, exactly. I told people to bet their second mortgage on the Seahawks, but it worked. So, hopefully they got a new house. But do you like? Yeah, I know you make videos and you blog, but which one do you kind of prefer to do? Because I've never once written a blog because I write like at like a seventh grade level. So.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue that I write much higher than a seventh grade level either. But I think, well, I started out blogging, right? That's why Nick originally had brought me on was to contribute through a written medium rather than videos. If you asked me this question a year ago, I would 100% say blogging because although it may not seem too apparent right now, but I'm like really an introvert. I was kind of nervous in the beginning to put myself out there to thousands of people. At the time, he had like probably 10 to 15,000 subscribers. So although I was excited to get my opportunity on video, I was definitely nervous about it. And you could see it. If you guys like go back and find the video that I was first on, right? It was a simple question and answer video that people were asking. It was at the end of the season. So I thought it was like, obviously it's important. I want to do well answering people's questions, but I thought it was a lot more important than what it was. And I'm not trying to downplay it, but like I had 3 to 4 pages of notes for like 5 questions. And you could tell I was like reading off of my notepad. And Nick actually left the part in where like I started to like stutter and didn't know what to say. And I'm like, damn, I'm not good at this at all. Just keep going. So I was like reading off of my page and it definitely was a struggle for the first couple times. And even in the summer, right? Because I only did a couple videos at the end of the actual season. And then I took a pretty long break. I did videos here and there. And then in the summer, we did every single week. So I still wasn't 100% comfortable or confident on camera to begin the summer. And I'm sure you guys could see that too. Even I think like the first video we talked about offensive lines, and it was still very repetitive, very robotic, just me going on and on about the same things. But I think as time went on and I started to get a little bit better and realized I didn't have to write down every little thing I was going to say and just put out, bullet points to refer to, I think I definitely got better on camera. So at this point, I would say I prefer videos more because it reaches more people. I feel like I can help more people that way. I definitely feel more confident doing what I'm doing, and it's a lot more like camaraderie, like me and Nick just going back and forth, just talking about football. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I enjoy blogging because first off, it's like a creative outlet. I like writing, and I like, building an argument around it. You can also build a better argument blogging because it's similar to like a movie and a book, right? People always say the book's always better than the movie because you can put more details into the book than like a 2-hour like time slot in a movie. It's the same with a blog, right? If you want to build an entire argument and write 5,000 words, you can. In a video, that's not always going to come to fruition because whether it's the continuity of the video or the flow of the conversation, some points that you really want to bring up don't get put into there. And I think I had that struggle going into my first videos because I wanted to put every point that I had in the blog out to the world. And now I realize you can't always do that when you're trying to make a cohesive argument.
Yeah. Do you think that videos are like the way of the future, or do you think people are still going to continue to read blogs as much? Or do you think it's just going to become like a straight video thing or like a TV type of thing, if you get what I'm saying?
I think there's always going to be space for like blogs and written form because a lot of people at work in their day job they can't watch videos, but they also don't want to do their work. So they'll just read a blog.
That makes sense.
It's easier to consume it that way. But videos, you can definitely see on YouTube. There's a lot of people putting out videos. Fantasy football is becoming more mainstream. I mean, you watch Red Zone and Scott Hansen's talking about a fantasy football stat like every 2 seconds. Like John Brown will catch a 2-yard out. He's like, that's 6.2 points for your fantasy leagues. Like, it's becoming mainstream, but I think there's always going to be a space for both of them to thrive.
Yeah, I think so as well. Honestly, I think that the video has been getting bigger. Like, I know Nick at the beginning of the summer was talking about Twitch and stuff like that, how that was getting bigger. And I noticed that is like a way to break in, but I think that that's a lot harder, to be honest, than like making YouTube videos.
Yeah, we tried Twitch one time and I had like the comments up there while we were doing a video. We were just doing any other regular type of video, but like kind of showing behind the scenes of us recording.
Yeah.
And I made the mistake of reading the comments and people were talking about the bet I had in the back, which isn't actually mine, but we'll say it's mine because it's part of my brand now, like the bunk bed guy.
Yeah. From college, I would assume that's from.
Yeah, so people were talking about that and I kind of lost it on video. I was just laughing. So yeah, Twitch is fun. It's hard to set up. We didn't do it anymore because we couldn't figure out how to like put the audio on there, but definitely I don't think it's as saturated as YouTube, and it's probably an easier avenue to get success right now because there aren't as many faces on that platform.
All right, that definitely makes sense. So going back to Nick, have you really learned anything from him that you felt was like really important, like that you couldn't have learned from like anyone else?
Well, definitely hard work, right? I've been following him for a long time, right? Just him building a business out of nothing, being extremely successful, at least in my eyes, for what he's done, just building a brand, starting out with a media company, being able to like survive off of fantasy football, I think is extremely impressive. And for me, just the hard work he has put into what he did and like giving me the opportunities that he has given me, just capitalizing on those opportunities through hard work and stuff. Like if in the very beginning when he brought me on to write those blogs, I didn't take advantage of what he gave me and I just wrote one like every 2 or 3 months and I didn't put much work into it. Like if I'd been putting out blogs, it took me 10, 20 minutes to write, but it took me 2 months to get them out, I'm sure I wouldn't be where I'm at today. Like you have to always, no matter what position you're put in the work to get there. Because if we think about it, right, this isn't like an actual sport. Nobody is born with like the gene to talk about fantasy football. Nobody is like inherently better at predicting who's going to score more half PPR fantasy points in week 13 of 2018. Like nobody is just better at that. You just got to work hard. I guess I know it sounds stupid because it's like a fantasy game, but like there's analytics behind things, just like getting your workout to people in a quality and efficient manner, I guess you could say. Like it all comes down to hard work and if you really want to do it or not, because nobody just wakes up in the morning and is like inherently better at it than you.
Yeah, I agree. Do you feel like you're more of an analytics guy or more of like a, like seeing like eye type of guy, eye test kind of guy? Because I think I'm more of an eye test kind of guy than like going super deep into the numbers, because the numbers don't necessarily tell you everything, at least to me.
Yeah, it's a little half and half. I know when we do like the rookie type of stuff, I'm very heavily into like the eye test, mostly because I don't know too much in depth about players necessarily. When it comes down to like the NFL, obviously I'll watch like Red Zone and I'll watch replays of the games to see how players are being used. but I typically get like a good feeling on, or I know like a good bit about a player without actually watching too much film on them. Like even a Derrick Henry, right? I know he's a big dude that's going to break off an 80-yard run once every 10 carries. So I don't necessarily need to watch every single game to have a full solidified opinion on them. I think a lot of the analytics do it justice, whether it's like broken tackles, big runs, usage, snap percentage. I think those are very helpful. I'd say, though, I probably lean more on analytics than viewing because it's more objective and it's easier to form an argument around objective facts than
Yeah.
subjective opinion.
All right. So when you're talking about rookies, do you really think that Dynasty is going to continue to grow at like a rapid rate? Because if I'm being honest with you, like I had no idea what Dynasty was like 2 years ago. And now every YouTube video, like in the summer, Dynasty rankings, Dynasty this, Dynasty that.
I really hope so. I love Dynasty. I only started like a year ago, but I'm pretty invested into it. We're going to be doing a lot of Dynasty content this offseason. I just think it adds another element to fantasy football that, seasonal leagues don't have. It gives you a full year-round view and perspective of the league. You're really paying attention to off-season moves, and it helps you in seasonal leagues too because you get to see whether it's coaching changes, whether like an offensive lineman gets signed to a new team. In Dynasty leagues, when you like fully plugged into the NFL season year-round, these type of things, and you can, be one step ahead when it comes to those seasonal leagues and knowing how different opportunities and situations change based on the draft and based on like blurbs from coaches or what have you. So I definitely think Dynasty, not that it's the future, but I think it's definitely gaining traction in the industry. And I think if you haven't been involved in a Dynasty league before, I highly suggest that you do it now because it's super fun. You get to meet new people because typically when you start a Dynasty league, it's not always like with your friends that you actually know in real life because so many are like apprehensive to start or like change their current league into a Dynasty league. But there's like tons of forums to join it, even on like through Big Dogs, right? We have a Patreon and we have a sleeper type of thing where you can meet other people who are like-minded and start a Dynasty league. And, you meet new people through that, you get new strategies, and it's more interesting to break down players that you might not necessarily know in rookies and like draft sleepers in like the 20th round. So for me personally, somebody who's invested in fantasy football, I think it's definitely a good thing to start to get into.
Yeah, now I know we've talked about this on like a video with Nick, but for my audience, do you believe in like the go all in young, or are you like a mixed kind of guy? Like for Dynasty, do you think you should just draft guys that are very young, studs, this, that, the other thing? Do you try to go like in the middle?
Me personally, what I did for one of my drafts was just try to win now, but also think a few years in the future, right? Nobody can predict what's going to happen 5 to 10 years out. If you draft like a Josh Rosen expecting him to get a job in 2023, like that's probably not going to work out for you. So like me personally, I went for like guys like Russell Wilson. I drafted like an Andrew Luck who I traded before he retired. But I think to keep it engaging, you have to either build a team. Well, not that you have to, but I think it's more fun if you build a team that's either ready to compete now or you're buying players that have a really good opportunity to break out in the foreseeable future. Like this past year, DJ Moore, Cortland Sutton, even a DJ Chark, like those are guys that not necessarily were high picks in startup drafts, but they're somebody that you can kind of hang your hat on to break out in the upcoming future. And I think as long as you have a plan, no matter what it is going into the draft, you'll have a good time in Dynasty because it's kind of like you're running your own type of franchise and you can control the fate of your team through making trades and acquiring rookie picks and whatever.
Yeah, now on Twitter, I follow this guy. His name's Scott Fish. I assume you know who he is. He sells like Orphan Teams on like Twitter. And I was just so confused on why people do these certain things. Like this one team had Saquon and CMC, and they traded them for 6 first-round picks. And I was like, is that even worth it? Like, I don't know. I don't understand. People get very trade happy, I've noticed.
Yeah, I'm one of those people that trades a lot. That's tough. I would say the only way I would do that is if the rest of your team is absolutely like abominable. If there's like nothing else about your team that is like the saving grace, if you don't have like any other receivers, I would maybe do that trade. But even then, those are like the top 2 dynasty assets that you could have. You could probably squeeze out more for them. You could probably get like an entire roster of proven talent just for those 2 players. So I'm not so sure about that. I probably wouldn't take on that orphan team if I knew that all they had were 6 picks and nothing else.
Yeah, I know. I saw it and I was like, this is crazy because I saw a bunch of people wanting this. They want those. They just love the rookie draft, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknown in there and there's a lot of intrigue through that. But when you have somebody who is solidified and is young, like McCaffrey and Barkley are 22 and 23 years old and they've already been running back ones multiple times in their careers, like you don't move those assets for cheap.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Now, obviously, this is an interview that's good forever, but how do you feel about the college football game that's coming up? Do you watch college or do you watch it like after?
I watch intermittently. I don't watch like many games. I don't watch like Louisiana Lafayette play like South Alabama.
Oh yeah, no, I don't watch that shit
I'll watch
either.
I'll watch the big games, but I think like for the college football playoff and even the national championship game, I think those really influence rookie picks and rookie drafts probably a little bit more than they should because even in like regular football, right? A lot of these, like in the playoffs, we just saw Derrick Henry go for like 150 yards and a touchdown and absolutely bury the Patriots. It's not like we didn't know who he was before that game. So
Mhm.
although they're doing it on the biggest stage against good competition in the national championship game, we're going to see a couple of guys like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire move up draft board because of that. Even a T. Higgins. Like I
Mhm.
think maybe temper your expectations, but since there's going to be a lot of eyes on them, understand that if the consensus on those players bumps up a lot, it's probably because they were on the biggest stage performing or underperforming if they fall down draft boards.
Yeah, so how you were talking about how college would impact the draft, like these like big time games. Do you think that Hard Knocks affects the fantasy football draft? Because I honestly think it does.
I think it does because I don't remember too much past 2 years ago, but I know last season the Browns were on there and John Dorsey, that one scene was like the eagle has landed and Josh Gordon like slow rolls into the video.
Yeah.
Like he bumped up draft boards because people were hyped up that he would play that season. He ended up obviously not returning value on the Browns. He went to the Patriots and he had a decent enough season. Even this past year, right? Like Darren Waller, he was getting a lot of hype before Hard Knocks. Then he went on there. We saw his progress throughout the preseason, his story, and like how he got better. Um, so that obviously helped gain hype around him. But you also have to realize that anybody that likes football and has an HBO subscription is watching it too. It's not like you're getting any secret in-depth information that isn't available to everybody else. And teams aren't going to put out information that like benefits everybody else in the league. They're not going to, tell you any plays. They're not going to tell you how different like players are used in that offense. So you just got to realize that what they're putting out is mostly for entertainment and not necessarily like an inside view on what the team is planning to do that like next season.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that the funniest part about this season of Hard Knocks was all that Antonio Brown drama and how like it all seemed to come to an end when he got traded and then, eventually his downfall. But I don't know if you saw this, but did you see on Twitter Logan Paul against Antonio Brown? You see
I
any of
did
that?
see that, and I'm not sure how. I don't know like anything about Logan Paul, but I'm not
Oh,
sure
okay.
how he's going to take on a professional athlete who is in like peak physical condition. So I
Yeah,
don't.
no, I have no idea. I just saw it on Twitter. I just thought it was funny because Antonio Brown said he'd fight him. But I mean, I don't know why Logan Paul would even want to do that or why Antonio Brown would even want to do that. His head's already messed up. You don't want to get hit again.
Yeah, it would probably sell a lot of tickets, and whatever the odds on Antonio Brown are, I would tell you to put the mortgage on that because that is probably the best bet you could make.
Oh no, the odds are unreal. It's like you get him plus 1,000 or some shit. If you get plus 1,000 on anything, you got to bet the house on that.
I'm gonna put my bunk bet on that.
Exactly. You got to put the bunk bet on that. Now going back to like Dynasty, obviously Dynasty is like forever, like goes during the off season, but like the regular season, do you feel like burnout during the season at all, or do you like feel perfectly fine like the whole time? Because I know Nick talked about how he feels burned out, and at the end, I kind of feel that as well. I produce like 12 videos a week. It's crazy, but
Yeah, I think if you continue to produce the same type of content and you don't necessarily feel like you're helping anybody with it and it's repetitive, I think that's the quickest way to feel burnout, right? For most of the season, I'd say weeks 1 through maybe 12, Nick and I were doing videos on trade targets. And after like week 4 and week 5, people kind of know like players' roles in the offense. Obviously, there will be breakout players like a Devontae Parker, but at that point, I think you start to realize that your information is getting repetitive and you're not necessarily helping as wide a range of people as you can be helping. And the quality goes down once you start to lose that luster for what you're talking about. So definitely this season, there was a little bit of burnout, I know, between Nick and I. But once we started to talk more about like Dynasty, potential breakouts for 2020, like sleeper picks, and more so just varying our content, at least I can speak for myself. I felt like that really like reinvigorated my love for talking about fantasy football because I'd be lying if I said that by week like 10, it kind of felt repetitive and I wasn't necessarily helping too many people doing what I was doing. But like blogging wise, I don't ever feel really burnt out doing that because I choose to write the blogs. I'm not told to write the blog. So I write what I like to write, whether it's like the pick'ems or helping people with trade advice. I used to do injury articles last year, but I realized Roto World or Roto Wire, whatever, does a better job than I do, and I didn't necessarily like to write it, so I kind of just didn't do that anymore. But as long as you do something that you feel helps a lot of people and makes you feel good when producing it, I
Mhm.
don't think there would necessarily be a burnout phase because you don't ever really get burned out of something that you like to do. Like if you like to play basketball and you play basketball every day, you're probably not going to get burnt out of it because you have that innate passion for it.
Yeah, I kind of agree in that. I just think that sometimes when you work so hard for like a certain amount of time and then like you just stop for a while, it's just kind of different. I don't know. Like the fantasy football is just weird because the content gets really popular in the summer, and then as the season goes along, it kind of declines. And if you're still producing content that you think is good, then and not seeing like the
The
views
results,
that
yeah.
you want to see, it's just not as good.
Yeah, from like July to the beginning of September was, at least for our videos, we're getting a lot more views than from, let's say, like October to December, mostly because I'm not so sure if it's because people don't want to consume as much content during the season, but I think a lot of fantasy football has to do with draft prep. And that's why
Yeah.
draft guides are so popular, because people think that draft day may be the biggest day of the fantasy season. But if you think about it, a lot of moves are made throughout the season. A lot of sleepers emerge from the waiver wire. There's a lot more preparation and things to capitalize on during the season than necessarily there is up to the draft, because you're always going to pick busts. Not everybody in the draft guide that you hype up as a sleeper is going to break out. So I'm not so sure that numbers in the future during the season are going to grow as people start to realize that, but definitely the engagement you see a lot more during the summer. And I would suggest to not get not upset, but not get disappointed when numbers start to fall throughout the season, because from what I've realized, that's just like kind of a trend in this industry.
Oh yeah, I definitely understand that. I wasn't saying that I was like upset, but like it goes like at the beginning of the season, you see it very high, and then like week 8, and then it
Yeah,
just
you start
starts
to
going
wonder if you're
down.
doing something wrong, but you look around and you see it's kind of happening with everybody.
Yeah. Do you feel like fantasy, like watching the game of football, is like when you're like watching Red Zone? Do you feel like it's less enjoyable now that you're like an expert? Do you find like doing all this research as less enjoyable, or not as an expert? Because everyone says something different. They say they're an expert, an analyst, some
Did
fucking
you just
idiot
say
who
I'm not
talks
an
on the
expert?
internet.
No.
So
Watching football, I think watching Red Zone, I feel more obligated to watch that, I guess, to see like who scores and when they score and from how far out they score, to like be able to talk about that. So in that aspect, I don't feel like I could, not that I can never sit down and watch a full game of a team that I want to watch. Um, but I definitely have like the time or whatever to go on Game Pass and rewatch games that I did want to watch. As for like playing fantasy football, I don't think I've lost the love for actually playing it after becoming like an analyst or whatever I am, I guess.
yeah.
Just because I wouldn't continue to do what I'm doing in the fantasy football space if I didn't still enjoy watching and playing fantasy football. Because first off, if I did continue to like give out advice without liking it, that'd be a disservice to me, because I'd be wasting time doing something I don't like. And it'd
Yeah.
also be a disservice to the people that follow me, because I'd be giving out information about something I don't care about. So I don't think I've lost any luster for the game of football or fantasy football. I actually think it has enhanced like how into fantasy football I am, because I kind of feel that obligation to go out there and do some in-depth research and things that I would probably do in my free time if I really wanted to, not necessarily because people ask me questions or whatever. I would look into the numbers regardless if I was on Twitter answering people's questions or not. So it really hasn't impacted how I watch the game or how I deal with fantasy football.
That makes sense. Did you see that DFS drama? How the this like lady that was on The Bachelor, her and her husband like made 2 different accounts, and she won the $1 million or whatever on it.
I
And
think I saw that.
okay, then we don't have to talk about it then if you don't like know a lot about it. But I just thought it was funny how a lot of people get after like, oh, it's so easy to win on DFS if you had 300 lineups. I could put in 600 lineups, and my ass would not have $1 million right now. So
Wasn't it because she had 150, her husband had 150, and then
yeah, that
one of
makes
them hit?
300.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see anything wrong with that. Like, you probably have an alibi for it. Just be like, yeah, he was, I don't know, he was at work and he put in 150 lineups. Like, I
Yeah.
feel it's pretty easy to get around as long as there's no evidence for you manually putting in a lineup for him.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Now I'm going to get to like the quick question portion of the interview. Obviously, it doesn't have to go super quick. These are just like some questions that I thought would be interesting. Now, obviously, if you guys follow Nick as well as Noah, obviously they talked about how they want to move everything to in like the summer. Do you feel, are you like interested in going to New York in the summers? Does that like make you feel like
Yeah,
excited?
I'm definitely interested in going to New York. I think uh like it's a great opportunity for me, and like I'm humbled by it that he would want to like bring me to New York with him to create content, obviously. But I also think it will enhance the content we do, whether it's diversifying what we do, the quantity of videos we can produce. And I also think, and I'm sure you can tell from this video, that a lot of things are lost in translation when doing a video over a computer, right? You don't necessarily pick up on all the social cues. Like, obviously, I've never talked to you before, but I don't necessarily know when you're going to finish talking, when it's going to be my turn to talk. Just things you
Yeah.
can pick up much easier when you're talking in person. Even if it's like a joke that you tell, like Nick and I will do a video, and I'm not always looking at the sidebar where the video is actually going on. He might tell a joke or might do like a hand motion or something, and I don't pick up on that because I'm either looking at my notes or I'm looking something up that he had said just to, fact check it if he asks me to fact check it or what have you. So I think it'll definitely improve the quality of videos. And another thing, like not like necessarily emotion, but like speaking with emotion definitely comes out better when it's face to face, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm talking to a camera right now. I don't have any connection to this camera talking to it. It's hard to be like witty and hard to be like charismatic, for me at least, talking through a camera. And you look at all the big podcasts out there, whether it's the fantasy footballers, they do that face to face. Part of my takes face to face. Like Joe Rogan podcast, like all these big podcasts are face to face. And I think it just enhances the experience of a podcast when you're actually physically interacting with a person rather than through the internet and through a camera.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. I see a lot of pretty much every single podcast that is like where they get back and forth, like a great connection is in person. Like if you try to watch it, obviously, like some people do like online podcasts like this, and you notice like sometimes people talk over each other because they just don't know, like you said,
Yeah,
exactly how
it's
they.
sometimes we just did it right there. Yeah, but
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly.
it's hard. It's hard to know, and like especially when I first started out, when I was doing videos at college where I used to live in the dorms, they didn't have the best internet, and sometimes Nick would stop talking, and I didn't know if the video had like paused or whatever. So I would just sit there, and he's like, "When are you going to start talking?" I'm like, "Well, I didn't know the video was continuing to roll." So it's tough sometimes, especially if you don't have the best internet. So I hope that all the kinks in that are going to be ironed out when we go to New York, and I'm excited for the opportunity.
Nice. All right. So you said you were in college. What is your college like major? If you're comfortable saying that, obviously.
I'm an accounting major, so
Wow.
numbers and type of stuff like that.
Real smart guy we got here.
Uh, you could say that, I guess.
Yeah. All
I'll
right.
let you say it. I want to say it about myself.
Exactly. Do you feel that Eli Manning should be in the Hall of Fame? Now, I know Snacks would obviously have a different opinion on this, maybe than you.
I think it's weird. The NFL Hall of Fame is completely different from other halls of fame. Like basketball, I could play 2 games in the NBA and I'd be considered for the Hall of Fame. Like they let everybody in. Baseball, they're very like picky and choosy depending on whether or not you use steroids, I guess. For football, I don't know. It seems kind of superficial. Like it's about like your reputation, right? Terrell Owens still isn't in the Hall of Fame. Isaac
Yeah.
Bruce and Torrey Holt, they were like awesome wide receivers. They're not in the Hall of Fame. Eli Manning, although he was never like the best at his position any given year or top 5 or top 3, he won 2 Super Bowls. He knocked off probably the best franchise in the past 20 years. So I think he definitely has the accolades to make it into the Hall of Fame. First ballot, I think it's going to be tough because just looking at the numbers, which I know a lot of people do, like Phillip Rivers has had a better career. Ben Roethlisberger has had a better career, and he has rings. So I think he'll eventually make it. I'm not so sure he'd be a first ballot like walk-in Hall of Famer like a Drew Brees would or like a Tom Brady would.
Yeah, definitely based off of his name alone, I think he gets in. Well, I don't believe he personally deserves it. I mean, I live in New Jersey, so there's a bunch of Giants fans everywhere telling you how great Eli Manning is. I mean, Daniel Jones, like, could have been better than him, maybe, They look exactly the fucking same. So put Daniel Jones there. Maybe he beats the Patriots twice. Who knows?
He might. He's got the opportunity to now with Tom Brady going down the gutter.
Yeah, now with Tom Brady, do you feel like, what do you think he's going to do now? I read a lot of people believed he was going to retire, and then today he put some shit out on Instagram pretty much saying he's not fucking leaving, like in Wolf of Wall Street. So
I saw that he's buying a house in Los Angeles, but the dude's also worth like $10 billion. His wife is like a Brazilian supermodel, so they can just buy a house wherever they want. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going anywhere. And there's rumors of him going to the Chargers. I just dismissed those. Yeah, I think he's going to stay with the team. The team has such a connection with him. I don't see any reason. Like, he's taken pay cuts for so long to stay with the team that if he asks for a little bit more money this season, I don't see how they just, like, turn him away, right? They're probably just going to roll over and give him another 2 years because although he isn't playing up to, like, his peak level, like that 2007 season or whatever, he's still a serviceable quarterback and he gets the job done. I think he needs more receivers and more weapons through the passing game and probably a better running back, give Damian Harris more touches. But the defense is still great, and he's definitely a good enough quarterback to still lead a team supported by a defense to, the Super Bowl.
yeah, I just think a lot of people talk about it because they have that wet dream that McDaniels is going to go with him and they're going to go join some other team and go defeat the Patriots, which I entertain in my videos, like as a joke, saying he's going to come to Miami and be with Flores. But that's not fucking happening. I think he stays put as well. Do you
Yeah,
feel that? Oh, sorry. Do you think that Rivers is going to come back next year, or do you feel like his time is done as a Charger, as a Chargers
uh,
fan?
my opinion or my hopes are that I hope he doesn't come back. I mean, it's apparent that he is not the answer there. There were so many games that they lost, one possession games where, it's like 2nd and 10. You can not run the ball because the clock's going to run out, but you could just take like easy dump off throws over the middle to Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, two very good receivers, or an Austin Eckler. And without fail, every single time he throws a 40-yard bomb to Mike Williams that goes 10 yards over his head and gets picked. I saw that happen at least 5 times this year. It hurt me. It took a few years off my life. And I think it's time for him to go, but I think the team's going to pay him. And I think the team's going to pay Melvin Gordon too. He has I don't know, he has a good connection with not necessarily the front office, but like everybody on the team likes him. And it seems like he really wants to be there. I could see them negotiating a contract and just completely ruining what could be a decent enough rebuild around, they have good pieces. They just always get injured. But if they moved on from Phil and they, didn't want to pay Melvin Gordon and use that money elsewhere, I think they could be competitors, but I don't see that front office making the rational decisions.
Yeah. Do you feel like they would bring in a new quarterback like via the draft, or do you think they try to get someone like Teddy Bridgewater, something like that?
I don't know. I was contemplating on them just going to Tyrod Taylor and using him like as a bridge to Tua.
Mhm.
I'm not so sure that's going to happen. Like, I don't think Tyrod would be a bad option. I know he's not the best quarterback in the league, but he's versatile. And I think with the weapons they have, in the read game and like RPOs and type of stuff with him, I think that would definitely open up the offense a bit more than what they have with Phillip Rivers. But then again, I'm not so sure he's going to be a quarterback that's going to lead a team deep into the playoffs. So I would like to see them get Tua, trade up for him. The team, again, I'm not so sure that they're smart enough to make those front type of decisions. They'll probably just draft Justin Herbert and get another 15 years where they don't really compete for anything.
Yeah. Now, going back to Melvin Gordon, do you feel like in the next couple of years, we're going to be seeing a lot of people try to hold out like we saw with Gordon, Zeke, like Michael Thomas at the beginning, Julio, I believe, as well?
Yeah, I totally think so. I don't like, obviously running backs, there's that whole, not conspiracy, but there's that notion that running backs don't matter. And although I don't disagree, you have to realize these guys are putting their body on the line 300 times a season in between tackles with like 300-pound behemoths just hitting in the chin over and over again. And the shelf life, sure, it's shorter, and maybe they don't help you win games year after year, but you got to realize that they're humans too, and they have to support their families after they retire. So I think on a personal level, they should hold out because they're putting their health on the line every single time they step out in the field. Do I think that they should get paid as much as a quarterback? Probably not, because it's more of a merit-based game where you get paid based on how much you help the team. I think an interesting way around this, I'm not so sure how this would work. I'm not like a contract expert, but maybe rookie contracts for running backs would be the highest valued contracts that you can get as a rookie, because
Yeah.
the shelf life after that 4 or 5 years is up is very slim, right? Not many running backs, unless you're the elite of the elite, get a big second contract. So I think paying them early out the gate, I know there's some worry about that, because what if a player just doesn't produce early, like a
Yeah.
Derrick Henry, right? He was a 2nd-round pick. He didn't do much early on. But if you pay those first-round running backs a good amount of money, that'll probably incentivize them to not hold out because they had made a good chunk of their cash in the beginning of their careers.
Yeah, I think they could also try to up the incentives. Like obviously, like they make money if they get 1,000 yards, but make it worth more money. Obviously.
Yeah, that would make sense, because right now, I totally understand that they want more money, but if you're underperforming, like Devonta Freeman's getting paid a ton of money and he's been hurt a lot throughout his career. So I feel for the guy, but like if you're not producing, maybe you shouldn't be making that sort of money.
Yeah, this is going to be the last question, then I can let you go. But how do you feel about the like playoff structure? Because I honestly think it's fucked up how like the Eagles get a bye, not a bye, but they get to play at home, and they're fucking terrible. They don't. The NFC East should have been relegated for the playoffs. They shouldn't have been allowed to play. Put someone else in there.
Yeah, I don't really know how else to do it. I know in basketball, people were proposing you just take the top 16 teams, you get rid of conferences and everything, you just throw them at each other. I'm not so sure how that would work in the NFL, just competition-wise. Like in the NFC East, as you said, like they had bad records, and a lot of that was they were playing each other. And if you lose to somebody in the NFC East, even if you're in the NFC East, that means you suck. So the winner
Yeah.
of the NFC East isn't great, because even then they were losing to the Cowboys, the Washington Redskins, the Giants. So I'm not necessarily sure how to propose a solution to it, but it was definitely weird to see Seattle, who was, what were they, 11-5 or 10-6,
Yeah, 10
go
and 6, 11
to
5.
go to Philadelphia and play those guys who couldn't even field a full roster for half the season.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you one last question. Sorry, I just thought of this one. Do you feel like the reffing this year has been like way worse? Because I know in the Houston Bills game, we saw the guy at the half, flip the ball to the ref. The ref didn't grab it. I think that's a fucking touchdown, but that's just me. But do you feel
Yeah,
like the reffing has been worse this year? Because I feel like it has been, to be honest.
I feel like there's no structure and there's no like objectivity to refereeing anymore. And I know that like pass interference is always going to be subjective based on like the closest referee and seeing if there's enough contact there. But when you go back and you watch a replay, like there was a play with DeAndre Hopkins late in the season, I think it was against Baltimore,
Yeah,
and he flat out got tackled in the end zone before he caught the ball. There was no PI called. BOB throws a flag or a challenge flag to review it, and then they say that there's no pass interference when you clearly see him get to Hopkins before the ball gets there. And then in another game, some guy can just get like tapped on the toenail and they'll call it pass interference.
yeah, exactly.
There's no like set in stone guidelines or rules for when there is a pass interference. It's all based on like the person viewing it and when they go to New York or whatever. And definitely what you said with this past week, whenever you put this out, but the first round of the playoffs, the guy just flipping the ball to the referee, like,
Yeah,
you're a professional athlete. How hard is it to do one lunge and just take a knee? Like,
yeah,
I think that should have been a touchdown too. You can't just argue common sense, because if you could, Jameis Winston would be the best quarterback in the league, because common sense would say, oh, I didn't mean to throw that interception 30 times. You could just, okay, fine, it wasn't an interception. He didn't mean to throw it to the middle linebacker. Like, I don't know. I think there has to be more set in stone, and the rules have to be ironed over a lot more this offseason if we want to see more objective football refereeing wise.
yeah. Same thing happened in the Vikings Saints game. Like some people are saying that's PI when Kyle Rudolph got hit. If you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah, when he
or
pushed
Kyle
off
Rudolph
at the end to
pushed
win
him
the
off.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's up to everybody's own interpretation, I guess, which I don't think is right, because it could change outcomes of games depending on who is wearing black and white stripes. So definitely I don't think like I advocate for robot referees, because I mean there has to be some human element to it. Like in baseball, if the umpires were robots, it wouldn't be as fun to get like wrung out on a pitch that's a little outside and then you get thrown out of the game for arguing. I think you still have to have the human element, but I think it has to be perfected a little bit more.
Yeah, part of my take always brings up how it should be like the not like a robot ref, but you go to like the bar, you see like, oh, is that a
Oh
PI or
yeah.
not? You call it
You
like
ask
that.
like a random person, it's like, is that a foul? It's like, yeah, the dude tackled him. It's like, okay, it's a foul. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that.
yeah. Just one last question. Obviously, I'm sorry, but DeAndre Hopkins, I think you were talking about how he got like that. That was obviously PI, and they posted it on Instagram, and then they fine his ass. Like, do you think that that's fair? Because I don't think that's fair either.
What did they find him for? He
I
complained about
believe,
it?
I believe, yeah, he like put out an
Mhm.
Instagram picture, and it was like, look, this guy's like fucking groping me over here, and they and then they're like, oh, there's the fine. They do the same shit in the NBA. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not so sure how the amendments work, but isn't that freedom of speech? Just saying like opinions. Maybe it's in their contract that they can't speak out against their employer. But yeah, and I know in the NBA, like Russell Westbrook gets fined all the time for yelling at fans after they call him slurs, which I see no problem with him doing to the fans because they kind of deserve it. But I guess they want to maintain a level of professionalism uh, in the sport. So I would say like the fines don't really mean much because they have a ton of money. But when you think about it, like if you were to get fined $25,000 for saying one word out of context, you'd be like, okay, maybe I just won't ever open my mouth again.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Noah, for coming out. Obviously, I'm going to end it here. Noah, would you like to say anything about like your Twitter or anything like that? Anywhere to follow you, I'll put it in the description.
Yeah, just check the description, I guess, FBGAWD on Twitter. And if you guys came over here from my Twitter or Nick's YouTube channel, Nick Ercolano's YouTube channel, follow Notorious Fantasy on YouTube. He's putting out a ton of content. He's very entertaining, I would say. He's very electric on camera. So
Yeah.
if you want to follow him, just show some support. All it takes is one click of the button, subscribe to his channel. I'm very humbled that he would bring me on here. I didn't think that anybody would want to interview me because all I really do is talk about fantasy football. But I'm glad you did decide to reach out to me. I feel like this was a good conversation. I feel like it was not really a learning experience for anybody else. I just kind of talked about some parts of what I do. But I'm very humbled that you would bring me on, and just follow Nick if you aren't originally from his subscriber base.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Noah, again for coming. I'm going to end the video here. I love you all. Make sure everyone hits that subscribe button. Go ahead and follow Noah as well. See you guys later. Goodbye.